All right. I think it's time to abandon the term progressive. I think it's time. I think it's been co-opted. There's just no way to recover it. As much as we've tried to define it, as much as we've tried to take it back, as much as we've tried to say to people, you're not a progressive. Unfortunately, the term has been co-opted, and I think it's time to abandon it. So here is one of my case in point here. Here's an article from ABC News saying 2020 Democrats jockey for the progressive mantle in the era of Trump. What does it mean to be a progressive in today's Democratic Party? This is the article, and in it, it has a picture here of Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. It goes on to say, at the end of what appeared to be an introspective survey of the progressive and moderate divide splintering the Democratic Party, former Vice President Joe Biden declared before a crowd of reporters swarming on him on a Washington city block, he says, quote, "I'm an Obama-Biden Democrat, and I'm proud of it," unquote. He goes on to say, the definition of progressive now seems to be changing. He then says, are you a socialist? That's a real progressive. I'll stack my position against anybody who has ever run or is running now or who will run, says Biden. So he's basically saying, okay, well, I'm not a socialist, but I'm still a progressive, and I'll stack my policies and positions up against anybody else, and we'll see just how progressive I am. Goes on to say later in this article, some Democrats seeking to claim the progressive mantle do not have to shy away from the label in the same way that candidates like Clinton and others have in the past. Sanders actually helped move the party, and the party has changed since then. And the context of Trump gives Democrats a little more freedom to go into new places. Julian Salazar, a professor of history and public affairs at Princeton University, told ABC News, while the former Delaware senator holds on to his moderate label, saying Friday the vast majority of the party is still basically liberal to moderate Democrats in the traditional sense, progressive groups reject Biden's thinking in favor of candidates who embrace this newfound freedom to pitch policy ideas once rejected by a wide swath of the party. Quote, Joe Biden doesn't want to acknowledge that the winds have shifted in the Democratic Party away from compromising with Republicans and corporate donors and toward the grassroots progressive movement, said Waleed Shahid, communications director for Justice Democrats. It's because so-called centrists like him are the last to shift with the winds of change. Very true. The center of the party and the center of the general American electorate has moved massively in an economic populist direction, where big ideas that were never even contemplated by the Obama-Biden administration are now squarely in the mainstream of public debate and supported by most voters, said Adam Green, the co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, who is backing Senator Elizabeth Warren in the 2020 primary. The center of gravity has shifted. Yeah. Okay, so I read this article. Also, I did an interview with a reporter for an organization called Better Angels, and the organization is trying to bring the left and right together to have conversation, and I've appeared on some of their podcasts. And so I was interviewed, and the interviewer, in my definition of progressive, is not a progressive. And we got into a discussion about what is a progressive. And I explained till I was blue in the face what a progressive was for an hour and a half. And when I later got the rough draft of the article back, which I would share, but they haven't published it yet. So when they do, I will share it. When I got it back and I read it, he goes on to say, well, Kim Iverson talks about being a progressive as being economics focused and not so much into social justice as much, and more, in identity politics, but more into economic justice. And he says, but I disagree. I'm still going to call myself a progressive. So there I was, an hour and a half till I was blue in the face talking to somebody about what a progressive really is and how the rest of the party is not progressive. He still ends up writing an article saying, yeah, but I'm still a progressive and I'm still going to call myself a progressive. And with this article and with that and with the numerous things that we've seen, so many of these candidates calling themselves progressive, so many people, I get a lot of pushback from people, things I say, and then they say something to me like, well, you're not a real progressive. You don't sound like a progressive. And I sit there and I wonder, yeah, but are you a progressive? Because I don't even know. You're calling yourself a progressive, but are you a progressive? What kind of a progressive are you? What do you mean by you're a progressive? Are you just saying, you're a social justice warrior and therefore you're a progressive? Do you even care about money in politics? Do you care about the interventionist wars? Do you care about, any of these things? Or are you just, no, you're, so then, yeah, you and I are not the same type of progressive. if that's so, if you're going to criticize me and not call me a progressive, and we're seeing this a lot, even amongst independent news, progressive independent news. We're seeing this, a lot of people calling themselves progressives, and maybe they're not really that progressive. Or, it's just leaving so much confusion on what the term, on who actually is a progressive and what is actually a progressive, that I think it's time to just say, okay, we've got to just change the name. We can't be calling ourselves progressives anymore because they've co-opted it. There's no taking it back. Every time we try to take it back, every time we try to redefine it and say, no, this is what it is, they don't seem to understand, and they continue to use that term. And I've had more debates about what a progressive is than I think any other type of debate. So I think it's time to move on from this term. Now, for me, I think a progressive is economics first, economics focused. I am focused on the money. So I'm focused on the money in politics. I'm focused on the money in the military. I'm focused on the money in just the money platform ideas, right? Like Medicare for all, that's a money idea. Or universal education, that's a money idea. I'm focused on the money ideas and getting the money out of politics and getting the money out of the military and more towards the American people. That, to me, is what a progressive focuses on. Here's the problem, though. When you talk to a Democrat, your mainstream establishment Democrat, they're going to say that they're for those things, too. This is where it gets confusing, because when you talk to them, they'll sit there and they'll say, yeah, but I'm for that, too. But then when you really dig deeper and you really talk to them more, you discover that, but that's not a priority for them. Their priority is not getting money out of politics. Their priority is not the interventionist wars and bringing the money back to the American people. The priority isn't on the money ideas. Like when you say Medicare for all, they'll say, yes, I'm for that. I'm for that. If we can get that done, if it makes sense, right? Oh, yes, I'm for universal education. If it can be worked out. And then, of course, many who are progressive and who are money focused first, many of us also would say, yes, and of course, I'm for a fair and equitable society, and I'm for people not being discriminated against. Of course, I am, of course, for those things as well. But my priority at this juncture in time is on the money, because I don't believe that we need to focus as much on the social injustices, because I think right now, we've moved to a point in our society where the social injustices are really more economic injustices. We have moved past the era of segregation. We've moved past the eras of slavery, the era of redlining. We have moved past many of these things where people, mixed race couples like my parents, wouldn't have been allowed to marry. We've moved past women being able to vote. We've moved past women being able to get bank accounts and own businesses and own land. We've moved past all this stuff. And so now we're in this new era. And this new era is all things are fairly equal except the money. The money is not equal. And the money situation is getting worse and worse because the politicians are bought off by the moneyed interests so that the moneyed interests can stay in power. And that's the real fight. And that's what I believe that's what being a progressive is. But a lot of people don't agree with me anymore because that term has been co-opted. And it is no longer, for a lot of people, they say, no, but it's all connected. You hear this a lot, too. It's all connected. And because it's all connected, I can be for all of the identity and racial and, and bigotry and focus on that because that has to do with the money. Because if we fix that, then we fix the money issues. That the real reason why people are poor is because a bunch of people are racist against them, which is bullshit. That is not why people are poor. People aren't poor. Yes, it is connected in a way, right? Like, of course, if you were enslaved, you had no money. And then that would, of course, perpetuate. And it would get to a point where, you're obviously held back in the game of life because your starting point is way further back than other people. I agree with this. I still think, however, that if we can fix the economic inequality, that at this juncture in time, we're going to be able to level out a lot of stuff. And we're seeing that because you do see wealthy women, wealthy Black people, wealthy gays, wealthy, you're seeing wealthy people of all stripes. And that's really where, you can make it in society being anybody at this point. It's just the numbers of people that are able to make it. And that has to do with their resources that they're given, not necessarily because of racism and bigotry. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for that. But so I think it's time to change the term. I like this idea, this term of economic populist. There's a lot of different types of populism. There's national populists. Those are the people that really just want to keep America filled with Americans, right? I guess there's white nationalist populists. So those are the people that want to keep America white. And so there's, I guess, social populism, maybe. That would be like the social justice stuff. And then there's economic populism. So I think we just have to change the term because, they're not wrong when they say I'm a progressive too. Even if, Joe Biden, I guess, he's not really wrong when he says, but I'm progressive, because the definition of the term progressive is, are you for progress? He thinks, yes, I'm for progress. See, I've got a platform of progress. So it's like, okay, yeah, I guess you're right on that, but that's not really how we've been using that term. And therefore, you're not a progressive. But I just think we've got to abandon the term, guys. I think it's just time to say, okay, you know what I am? I'm an economic populist. I believe in the economic issues are really where it's at. And that's going to help level out the playing field. Yes, I care about a lot of other issues as well, but my primary concern is economic. Therefore, I'm an economic populist. I think that's just how we're going to have to define ourselves, I think. But let me know what you think. Comment down below and tell me, or send me your comments. Where can you send me your comments? Because I left Twitter. You can comment on my Instagram account, or you can email me. Go to my website, KimIverson.com, and you can email me your thoughts on how we're going to redefine ourselves and what we should be calling ourselves moving forward.